The woman standing on the shoulder of Highway 93 at 11:40 at night was not wearing shoes. That was the first thing I noticed. Not her face, not the fact that she was alone on a pitch-dark stretch of road in northern Nevada with no vehicle in sight. Her feet, bare on the gravel in October. I was doing about 75 when my headlights hit her and I blew past before my brain even registered what I'd seen. I watched her shrink in the rearview mirror and I had about 4 seconds to make a decision. I could keep driving and call 911 and let someone else deal with it, or I could stop. I wish I had kept driving. I wish that more than almost anything I've ever wished for. Let me back up. I'm a contractor. I was 33 at the time. I drive long distances regularly for work. I was coming back from a job site near Ely heading south toward Las Vegas. If you've never driven that stretch of 93 at night, let me paint the picture. It's 2 lanes, no median, no streetlights, no towns for 50 or 60 miles at a time, just desert and sagebrush and the occasional cattle guard. The kind of road where your high beams are the only thing separating you from total darkness. I had been driving for about 2 hours and I was still an hour and a half from home. I was tired but alert. I had the windows cracked and the radio on when I saw the woman I pulled onto the shoulder about 200 yards past her and put on my hazards. I sat there for a minute watching in the mirror. She hadn't moved. She was just standing there, not waving, not walking toward me, just standing with her arms wrapped around herself. I got out and walked back toward her. As I got closer, I could see more. She was maybe mid-30s. Thin, wearing a light blue dress that looked like it had been through hell, dirt on the hem, a tear along one side. Her hair was messy, her face was blank. Not scared, not relieved, just blank, like she was somewhere else entirely. I asked her if she was okay. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, then she said, "I need to go." I asked her where. She said south. I asked if she had a car. She shook her head. I asked if someone was coming for her. She said no. I asked if she wanted me to call someone. She said no. She said, "Please, just take me south." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, not panic urgency, like she needed to be somewhere else as fast as possible, and every second standing on that road was a second too long. I should have called 911. I know that now. I knew it then. But she was barefoot on gravel in the cold, and she was clearly in some kind of distress, and I told myself I could drive her to the next town and drop her at a gas station where someone could help her properly. I opened the passenger door. She got in without hesitation. She sat down and immediately looked at the side mirror, not the road ahead. The mirror, watching what was behind us. I got in and started driving. She didn't put on the seatbelt. She kept her eyes on the mirror. For the first 10 minutes, she didn't speak. I asked her name. She said, "It doesn't matter." I asked if she was hurt. She said, "Not yet." That phrase sat in my chest like a stone. Not yet. I asked her what she meant. She said, "There's a truck." I looked in my rear view. The road behind us was empty, just darkness. She said, "It's not there yet, but it will be." She said, "He always finds me. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this story is about to get much worse. Also hit that like button right now." It takes 1 second. Now let me tell you what happened next. About 5 minutes after she said that, I saw headlights appear in my rearview mirror. Distant. Maybe a mile back. They were high off the ground. A truck. Coming fast, she saw them too. She made a sound, not a scream, not a gasp, a small, tight exhale like someone who had been holding their breath and finally let it out. She said, "That's him." I told her she didn't know that. She said, "I know his headlights." She was shaking now, not trembling, shaking, full body. She pressed herself against the passenger door as far from the center of the car as she could get, like she was trying to phase through the metal. The headlights got closer. Fast. Within 2 minutes, they were maybe a quarter mile behind us. I was doing 80. The truck was gaining. I pushed it to 90. The truck kept closing. At about 100 yards behind us, the truck's high beams came on. The interior of my car was flooded with white light. The woman covered her face with her hands. She was saying something under her breath. I couldn't hear what it was. It sounded like a prayer. The truck pulled into the oncoming lane and came alongside us. It was a large black pickup with lifted, tinted windows. I couldn't see the driver. The truck matched my speed for maybe 10 seconds, then it pulled ahead and cut in front of me, hard. I slammed the brakes. The truck slowed down in front of me. I swerved into the oncoming lane to pass. The truck swerved to block me. I hit the brakes again and pulled back behind it. The truck slowed to 40, then 30, then 20. It was forcing me to stop. The woman was screaming now. She grabbed my arm and said, "Don't stop. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop." I saw a gap. The truck drifted slightly left. I floored it and shot past on the right shoulder. Gravel sprayed everywhere. My tires were half off the pavement. The truck's horn blasted behind me. I got back on the road and pushed the car past 100. I drove like that for what felt like forever, but was probably 5 minutes. The headlights fell back. Slowly, further and further until they were just dots. Then they disappeared. Either he turned off or he stopped. I don't know which. I drove the woman to a gas station in Caliente. It was the only thing open. When I pulled in, she opened the door before the car had fully stopped. She got out and started walking toward the building. I called after her and asked if she wanted me to wait or call the police. She turned and looked at me. Her face was still blank. She said, "He won't come here. There are cameras." Then she said, "Thank you." And she walked inside. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes trying to decide what to do. I called 911 and reported the truck. I described it. I told them the stretch of highway. They said they'd send a unit. I don't know if they did. I never heard back. When I looked inside the gas station through the window, the woman was gone. The cashier told me nobody had come in. I described her. Blue dress, barefoot. He said he hadn't seen anyone like that. I walked through the whole station, both bathrooms, the back room, nobody. There was one entrance and I had been watching it. She walked through the front door and disappeared. I drove home that night at 60 miles an hour with every door locked and every mirror checked, and I did not sleep until the sun came up.
I picked up a man on the side of Interstate 70 in Kansas in the middle of a thunderstorm, and I will never do anything like that again for as long as I live. It was July of 2023. I was 28. I was driving from Denver to Kansas City to visit my sister. I had done the drive a dozen times. It's flat and boring and usually takes about 8 hours if you don't stop much. I left Denver around 2 in the afternoon. By 9 p.m., I was deep into western Kansas and the sky had turned into something biblical. Lightning every few seconds, rain so heavy, the wipers on full couldn't keep up. The wind was pushing my car sideways. I should have pulled over, but I kept going because I was stubborn and tired and wanted to be done. I was passing through a stretch of highway near Oakley when I saw him. He was standing under an overpass trying to stay out of the rain. He had a backpack, a baseball cap, a flannel shirt soaked through. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't sticking his thumb out. He was just standing there watching the cars pass. I drove past him. Then I felt guilty. The storm was getting worse. The nearest town was at least 20 minutes away. He was going to be standing under that overpass for hours. I pulled over about 100 yards past the overpass and put on my hazards. He ran through the rain and got in. He was polite, said thank you about 3 times, said his name was Greg, said he was heading to Salina, which was about 2 hours east. He said his car had broken down about 10 miles back and he'd been walking since. He smelled like wet fabric and cigarettes. His hands were shaking from the cold. I turned the heat on for him. He seemed grateful. He asked where I was headed and I told him Kansas City. He said Salina would be perfect if I didn't mind. I said no problem, if this story is already making you uneasy good. Leave a comment and tell me. I read every single one. Let's keep going. For the first 40 minutes, Greg was fine. Quiet mostly. He stared out the window at the storm. He made a few comments about the lightning. He asked what I did for work. I gave a vague answer. He told me he worked construction, seasonal stuff. He said he'd been working a job near Denver and was heading home. Normal conversation. Then around the 45-minute mark, his phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. He typed something quickly and put the phone away. After that, he was different, restless. He shifted in his seat. He kept checking the side mirror. He wiped his palms on his jeans. He looked at me and then looked away. Then looked at me again. He said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Do you have a charger?" I did. It was plugged into the center console. I told him to go ahead. He leaned forward to grab it, and as he did, his flannel shirt shifted and I saw something on his waistband. Metal, dark, tucked into his jeans on the right side. It was a handgun. I looked away as fast as I could. I kept my eyes on the road. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. I kept my breathing steady, even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. I told myself, a lot of people in Kansas carry. It's legal. It's normal. It doesn't mean anything. But the text had changed him. Whatever was on that phone had turned a tired, polite hitchhiker into someone who couldn't sit still and kept looking in the mirrors like he was being followed. About 20 minutes later, we passed a sign for an exit. Greg looked at the sign and then at me. He said, "Take this exit." I said I thought he was going to Salina. That was 2 more exits east. He said, "Take this one." I said, "This isn't Salina." He said, "I know. Just take this exit." His voice wasn't asking. Something behind it had hardened. I took the exit. The off-ramp led to a 2-lane road with nothing on either side. No gas station, no buildings, just wet fields and darkness. He told me to turn right. I turned right. We drove for maybe 3 minutes down a road with no markings and no lights. Then he said, "Stop here." I stopped. The rain was still pounding. The headlights showed nothing but road and corn. He sat there for a few seconds. Then he opened the door. He grabbed his backpack. He stepped out into the rain. Then he leaned back in and looked at me. His face was wet and the water was running down his forehead into his eyes. He said, "I need you to forget you ever saw me. I need you to forget this exit and this road and my face. I need you to drive back to the highway and not look back." "Can you do that?" I nodded. He said, "Good." Then he said, "You're a good person, and I'm sorry." He closed the door and walked into the corn. I sat there for maybe 5 seconds. Then I put the car in reverse and backed up until I could turn around. I drove back to the highway. I merged on and I drove the remaining 3 hours to my sister's house without stopping. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell my sister that night. I sat in her guest bedroom at 1 a.m. and tried to understand what had just happened. A man got in my car with a hidden gun and asked me to drive him to the middle of nowhere in a storm, and then walked into a cornfield and told me to forget his face. 2 days later, I searched the news for anything near that exit in Kansas. I found an article from the following morning. A body had been found in a drainage ditch about a mile from where I had dropped him off. The victim was a man in his 40s, shot once. No witnesses, no suspects. The article didn't have much detail, just enough for me to understand what Greg had been heading to do when he got in my car, and just enough for me to understand that the text he received was probably telling him exactly where to go. I didn't call the police. I was terrified, not of Greg finding me, of being involved, of having driven a murderer to the exact spot where he killed someone, and having to explain that in a courtroom, so I said nothing. I've said nothing for 2 years, until now.
When I was 22, I was broke and stupid and hitching rides across the country because I thought it was an adventure. I made it from Seattle to Montana in 4 days. Most of the rides were fine. Truckers who wanted company, families who felt sorry for me, a retired couple who bought me breakfast at a Denny's and told me stories about Woodstock. People are generally kind. That's something I still believe even after what happened on the 5th day. I was standing on the on-ramp outside of Billings, Montana. It was late afternoon. Hot. I had been there for about 2 hours. Trucks kept blowing past. I was about to give up and walk to the nearest gas station when a minivan pulled over. Couple. Looked to be in their mid-40s. The husband was driving. The wife was in the passenger seat. She rolled down the window and asked where I was going. I said east. She smiled and said they were heading to Bismarck. That was about 5 hours. I said that would be amazing. She said, "Get in." The back seat was clean. Almost too clean. Like it had been recently detailed. There was a pillow and a folded blanket on the seat. She saw me notice them and said they were for their son who usually rode in the back. She said he was staying with his grandmother this week. I said, "That's nice," and got in. The first 2 hours were great. They were friendly, talkative. The husband's name was Jim. The wife was Carol. They told me about their lives in Bismarck. He worked at a grain elevator. She was a substitute teacher. They asked about my trip. I told them about the people I had met. The trucker who talked about aliens for 3 straight hours. The family with 4 kids who let me ride in the back of their station wagon. Jim and Carol laughed at my stories. They offered me water and crackers. It felt like being with someone's parents. Safe, comfortable, normal. Then we stopped for gas. Jim went inside to pay. Carol stayed in the van with me. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Then she turned around in her seat and looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes moved over my face slowly, not in a friendly way, in an appraising way, like she was measuring something. She said, "You look just like him." I asked, "Who?" She said, "Our son." I said, "Oh." She kept looking at me. She said, "Same hair, same eyes, same build. You could be his twin." I laughed nervously and said I got that a lot, that I had a generic face. She didn't laugh. She just kept staring. Then she said, "How old are you?" I said, 22. Her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes got brighter. She said he would have been 22. Would have been. I felt the air leave the van. I asked what she meant. She turned back around in her seat without answering. Jim came back and got in, and we started driving. Nobody spoke for about 10 minutes. Then Jim said, "Carol tells me you remind her of Tyler." I said, "Yeah, she mentioned that." Jim nodded. He was quiet for another minute. Then he said, "Tyler passed away 3 years ago." I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Car accident. Right on this highway, actually." I didn't know what to say. I said something about how terrible that was. Jim just nodded again. After that, the energy in the van changed completely. Carol kept turning around to look at me. Not casually, deliberately, long looks that lasted 5 or 6 seconds. Jim adjusted the rearview mirror, and I realized he was angling it so he could see me in the back seat without turning around. They started asking me questions that felt wrong. What my parents' names were, where I grew up, what I did on weekends, whether I had a girlfriend. The questions were specific and personal in a way that felt like they were filling in details, like they were building a picture of me that matched something they already had in their heads. Then Carol said something that made every hair on my body stand up. She said, "You should come stay with us for a few days. We have Tyler's room. It's just sitting there empty. You could rest up before continuing your trip." Jim immediately agreed. He said it like it had already been decided. He said, "We'd love to have you. You could use a real bed and a hot shower." Carol said I could borrow some of Tyler's clothes. She said they were still in his closet. She said they would probably fit me perfectly. I want to be very clear about what I felt in that moment. It wasn't fear in the traditional sense. It wasn't like being threatened. It was something worse. It was the realization that these 2 people were not seeing me. They were seeing their dead son, and they wanted to take me home and put me in his room and dress me in his clothes and pretend. I don't know how far that pretending would have gone. I don't know if they would have let me leave after a few days, or if they would have found reasons for me to stay longer. I don't know what happens when 2 grieving parents find a stranger who looks like the child they lost and bring him into the house where everything is still exactly the way their son left it. I didn't want to find out. I told them I actually needed to get off at the next exit. I said I just remembered a friend lived near there and I was going to crash with him. Jim said, "Are you sure?" Carol said, "We'd really love to have you." Her voice cracked when she said it. I felt horrible. These were not bad people. They were broken people. People whose grief had bent them into a shape that couldn't distinguish a stranger on an on-ramp from the boy they buried 3 years ago. But I needed to get out of that van. The next exit was about 4 miles away. Those were the longest 4 miles of my life. Carol was crying quietly in the front seat. Jim was gripping the steering wheel and staring at the road. Nobody spoke. When we reached the exit, Jim pulled off. I grabbed my backpack and opened the door. I thanked them for the ride. Carol turned around one last time. Her face was wet. She said, "Tyler would have liked you." I said I'm sure he was a great person. Then I got out and closed the door. The van sat there for a long time, at least a full minute. I could see them through the windshield. Carol had her hand on Jim's arm. They were both looking at me. Then Jim put the van in drive and they pulled away slowly. I watched them merge back onto the highway and disappear. I didn't hitch another ride that day. I walked to a gas station and sat in the parking lot until dark. I called my mom and told her I was coming home. I didn't tell her why. I took a bus from Billings back to Seattle the next morning. That was the last time I ever hitchhiked. People ask me why I stopped, and I always give some practical answer about safety or growing up. The real answer is Carol's face when she turned around in that seat, and the way she said Tyler would have liked you, and the pillow and the blanket folded on the back seat of a van whose son had been dead for 3 years, waiting for someone to fill the space he left behind. Those were 3 true hitchhiker horror stories. If you made it to the end, tell me which one is going to stay with you. Drop it in the comments. The barefoot woman who vanished inside a gas station, the man who walked into a cornfield to do something unspeakable, or the couple who wanted to take a stranger home and turn him into their dead son. If you've got your own hitchhiking story, leave it below. The most disturbing ones get featured in future videos. Subscribe if you haven't. New stories every single week. Share this with anyone you know who's ever picked up a stranger on the road. And the next time you see someone standing on the shoulder at midnight, remember this. Not everyone who needs a ride is running from something. Some of them are running toward it, and you don't want to be the one who gets them there.